I'm Ben McClintock from defendingatutah.org. I wanted to take this special time. We've been talking about a lot on the radio regarding the UN coming to Utah on August 26th, 27th, and 28th of this month, right here in August. And so I want to go through and show you just some basic principles about the UN and about their upcoming visit to Utah, and then some things that we can possibly do about it. The UN, again, like I said, is coming to Utah. They're having most of their presentations and their events that they're doing at the Salt Palace on August 26th, 27th, and 28th. And this is really focused towards the youth and trying to get them propagandized into Agenda 2030, as well as the anti-family agenda of the United Nations. So what is the history of the United Nations? I want to give you some background of the principles that the United Nations is based upon. And then we can really start to move forward and understand why it's such a danger today and why it's a problem. So to be able to do that, we've got to get some basic foundations of what is America founded upon. Our country is founded upon the principles in the Declaration of Independence, that we are endowed by our Creator with certain inalienable rights. We have God-given rights, and that among these, of course, are life, liberty, and happiness, and that to secure or to protect those rights, governments are instituted among men, okay? So the United States is based upon the foundation, the principle that we have God-given rights, and that government is just there to protect those rights. Where the UN is founded upon a completely different fundamental principle. Their belief is that rights and freedoms, and this is according to their own UN Declaration of Human Rights, that rights and freedoms may in no case be exercised contrary to the purposes and principles of the United Nations. Okay, that's a huge difference, that they believe that you do not have any rights that might go contrary to their purposes. You have zero rights unless they give them to you, whereas America's foundation is the complete opposite of that. And this has been very problematic since its inception. So now the UN has been talked about as being the last best hope for peace. J. Irvin Clark explained that the UN Charter is built to prepare for war, not to promote peace. The Charter is a war document, not a peace document. It says not only does the Charter organization not prevent future wars, but it makes it practically certain that we shall have future wars. And as to such wars, it takes from us the power to declare them, to choose the side on which we shall fight, to determine what forces and military equipment we shall use in the war, and to control and command our sons who do the fighting. And so the United Nations has been since its inception. Its papers, its own founding documents make it a war document. It's a war organization under the Orwellian premise of stopping war. And this has borne out in matter of fact, actually, because not a single war since the beginning of the United Nations has been a constitutional war. All of the wars we've been in, Korea, Vietnam, Gulf War, Afghanistan, Iraq, every single one has been based on a UN declaration, not a congressional declaration. And so it is a direct assault on our Constitution, as well as our nation's right and ability to self-determination. And G. Edward Griffin, he wrote the book, The Creature from Jekyll Island, and he did several videos about the United Nations. I want to share with you a short clip from a video that he produced on the United Nations.
In 1960, in Africa, the Belgian Congo received its independence and established its own government in what later became known as Zaire. The new leadership immediately aligned itself with Moscow and began a campaign of terrorism and destruction in order to eradicate all traces of opposition to itself. When the nation plunged into chaos, one of its provinces, called Katanga, decided it wanted no part of the Red Revolution. It declared its independence and offered to align itself with the West. The will of the people was expressed in the words of their leader, Moise Chambé, who declared to the world, "We are seceding from chaos." Katanga remained a sea of calm amid the bloodshed and violence around it. And by this contrast, it became a thorn in the side of the central Congolese government, which now wanted to pull it back under its control. The Red regime was not militarily strong enough to accomplish that by itself, so it asked the United Nations to do it for them. The excuse they gave was that they wanted the UN to put down rebellion and to restore law and order in the Congo. The UN sent most of its military forces not to the central Congo, where thousands of people were being massacred and where law and order were very much needed to be restored, but to Katanga, where they were not needed and definitely were not wanted. The UN declared it was contrary to its own charter to intervene in the internal affairs of the Congo, and that it had no intention of doing so. But it was clear from the outset that this was not the truth. As some of the UN personnel even admitted later in their public speeches and books, the real purpose of the UN was to intervene in the Congo's internal affairs and to force an independent, anti-communist state back under the rule of a communist puppet regime.
Okay, so that the United Nations has never been about peace, has never been about protecting anybody. It is about enforcing and building world government. We have the founding people in the United States that were actually a part of writing the charter and helping to build the charter, men like Alger Hiss or convicted Soviet spies, and working with the Soviet Union to make sure that it was actually building a tyrannical world government. In fact, President Benson, he says that we should get out of the United Nations and get the United Nations out of the United States. And that's out of his chapter in the book, The Naked Cap, I'm sorry, not the Naked Capitals, The Enemy Have Done This, called The United Nations Planned Tyranny. The United Nations is designed to be a tyrannical organization. And this is continuing to this day. We go to 2015, the UN subverting free people. They are supporting totalitarian regimes where the UN troops are involved in the slaughter of civilian protesters. They actually killed people because they were involved in actually, standing up for their rights. And then we have right here in Utah in 2018, the Utah Valley University announced that they were going to join officially the UNDPI, which is the United Nations Department of Public Information. And what you have to do to sign up for this is that you are seeking to promote the agenda of the United Nations. Their role is to raise public awareness and support of the work of the United Nations through strategic communication campaigns, media, and relationships with civil society groups. And so now we have Utah Valley University officially signing up to promote the United Nations anti-liberty, pro-world government, world tyranny agenda. And in fact, when we brought this information to one of the vice presidents of Utah Valley University, he said, well, we have to give every side a point of view. Well, this is clearly false. They are not interested in giving every side a platform to have their point of view heard. No, their job is to make the public aware and to promote the United Nations agenda. And so ever since they joined this last year, they have been pushing to bring the United Nations to Utah. And so in 2015, the UNDPI, who this organization that the UVU just signed up to be a part of, they are seeking prison sentences for reporters because they simply did a report on the United Nations incompetence, putting somebody in jail simply for reporting incompetence, totally the antithesis to our idea of freedom of the press, the government being held accountable by people reporting on their actions. No, but the United Nations cannot handle that because you have no rights that go contrary to their purposes. In the next year, 2016, Matthew Lee was actually accused of exposing corruptions, as if that was like a crime, is to expose corruption. And so they take away his press credentials simply because he was exposing United Nations corruption. The United Nations, of course, we have here Jackie Biskupski on the Utah Valley University's website announcing that the UN is coming to Salt Lake City in August of this year. And as a part of that, she talked about some of the things that were going on. Why are they bringing the United Nations to Utah? And she actually mentioned a lot of the skeptics that are here in Utah against the United Nations, that they are coming despite the critics in our state that want what the UN is and what they do. And she says it's kind of unnerving for some of my political partners to think about the UN being here. Well, of course, because they are the antithesis of liberty. They are the antithesis of what America was founded upon. And instead, she is bringing them here for the purpose of promoting UN Sustainability Goal 11, which is a key function of Agenda 2030. Or you can Google Agenda 2030 or Agenda 21, which are very similar. Also go to defendingutah.org and do a search for Agenda 21, and you'll see what that is. But essentially, a broad overview, Agenda 2030, what she's promoting as Sustainability Goal 11, is the eradication of property rights and the family. And so the Utah legislature has been working to give your tax dollars, the money you work hard for, and have it confiscated by the state government, is using that money to fund this UN trip to the state of Utah. It was requested to get $755,000 for this conference coming up later on this month. And what's interesting, what is this money going to go to? It says right here, the UN host committee is requesting funds as enhancements for the event. So, that's a very generic term and could be used for literally virtually anything. And so we look here, and how much money did they actually get from the state legislature? Did they get the full 700? Well, no, they didn't get the full amount. They got $500,000 for enhancements of the event. And so this is the state legislature is giving your money under the approval, of course, of the governor as well, to be able to promote this anti-America, anti-liberty organization coming to the state of Utah to promote further their anti-liberty agenda, and not letting anybody come there to report on their activities that might be contrary to the official party line. We're not a part of the Stasi or a part of the Politburo, so we're not allowed to report on their activities. And so UN Sustainability Goal 11 is part of Agenda 2030. So Agenda 2030 is the most current program that's implemented of what was Agenda 21. I won't have time to go into it right now what that is, but please look into it further on our website. It was adopted in 1992 at the conference in Rio de Janeiro, and it's described as a profound reorientation of all human society, unlike anything the world has ever experienced, as a major shift in the priorities of both governments and individuals, and an unprecedented redeployment of human and financial resources. This shift will demand that a concern for the environmental consequences of every human action be integrated into individual and collective decision-making at every level. And so as we see that now with this conference coming to Utah will be promoting is the idea of the government getting into every decision that we made in every part of our lives, and that the government will now have to be a part of that because, of course, every part of our lives affects the environment. And so a part of what they say is about this is they promote this idea of sustainable development. Now, what is sustainable development? Well, Maurice Strong at the opening speech explained what was not sustainable to help us to understand what they are promoting as sustainable. He says that current lifestyles and consumption patterns of the affluent middle class involving high meat intake, the use of fossil fuels, electrical appliances, home and workplace air conditioning, and suburban housing are not sustainable. So, your house with your quarter-acre lot where you can garden on, or, when have air conditioning in the hot summer where it's 100 degrees outside, that kind of stuff right there, electrical appliances, being able to have, a washer and a dryer or an oven or a dishwasher, that's what they're saying when they're promoting it and bringing it to Utah, is saying what they're trying to get rid of in the future, which is why we're seeing this huge push in the state of Utah where the Utah legislature is mandating high density housing in the cities and threatening to take away, road funds if they don't go along with it. And so this is what they're going to be pushing even heavier when they come here in just a couple of weeks. And so they of course don't call themselves what they're doing Agenda 21. A lot of these programs in the state of Utah, and this goes back to the 90s under the Clinton administration, where they said that they had to do certain things to make sure that people didn't really realize what they were doing. So this guy, J. Gary Lawrence, he was the advisor to President Clinton's Council on Sustainable Development. He said that participating in a UN advocated planning process would very likely bring out many of the conspiracy fixated groups and individuals in our society. This segment of our society who fear one world government and a UN invasion of the United States, through which our individual freedom would be stripped away, would actively work to defeat any elected official who joined the conspiracy by undertaking local Agenda 21. So we call our process something else, such as comprehensive planning, growth management, or smart growth. And so these are ways that we can also see how our cities are implementing the United Nations agenda right here in our local communities. Because no, we're not having UN troops invade Lehigh or invade Salt Lake City. We're inviting them, as we see with this event coming on later on, and we're inviting their programs to be implemented to destroy individual liberty right here in our own state. And so one of the programs is ICLEI, which is the local government agencies that it's an organization for local governments to implement the program. And so this is one of the leaders of that is this man right here, Harvey Reuven, who is their vice chairman and also the Wildlands Project, and explaining how they are getting this sustainable development through. He says that, quote, individual rights have to take a backseat to the collective. And so they are working to, shove us into these stack and packs, and which takes away individual property rights, it erodes the family as well. And this helps them in their process of helping people to recognize or to believe that their individual rights have to take a back seat because, oh, well, yeah, I'm sharing all this land with all these people. This house isn't mine because this whole building is being shared by 1,000 other people. And it allows them to be able to erode individual liberty, individual property rights, and so much more with this. And in fact, when one of the programs and documents that the youth are going to be expected to sign when they at this event coming up in just a couple of weeks in Salt Lake City, they are going to be urging people. They're going to be agreeing that they are going to be using their influence for the rest of their lives to get rid of individual vehicles and move everybody towards being mandated to use public transportation or making it so inconvenient to use your private vehicle that people will be forced essentially to use public transportation. And so the UNDPI that the UVU is a part of, they had a conference in Korea in 2016 talking about implementing Agenda 2030 and the key to achieving Agenda 2030. What is the key to being able to implement their program? And that is that an ethos of global citizenship is required in order to fulfill this bold, people-centered, universal, and planet-sensitive development framework. So you're no longer a Utah. You're no longer, an individual. You're no longer an American. No, you have to give that up to be a global citizen and under the United Nations and their Declaration of Human Rights that says you have no rights that go contrary to these purposes of the United Nations, the destruction of the Constitution and of individual liberty. And so what are some things that we can do about it? A call to action. What we're asking you to do is to share this video to help more people understand the basics of what's going on, and then encourage them which will help them be able to watch future videos and read more articles that will help them understand what's going on and in more detail the reports that we'll be doing on the United Nations and their trip here to Utah. You need to keep up to date by subscribing to Defending Utah email updates and like and follow us on Facebook. Help to reach more people by donating to our website or through Venmo. And this will help us get billboards and radio ads and social media ads and so much more. And then also help us to educate youth and parents at the conference. If you want to help us by being a volunteer, make sure and contact us at info@defendingutah.org.